Envelope had been sitting on my kitchen table for 3 days before I opened it. I kept walking past it, made my coffee, fed the dog, watched the morning news, walked past it again. I knew what it was. A certified letter from Hargrove and Associates, the law firm my ex-wife Carolyn had used for 30 years. I recognized the return address. I just wasn't ready for whatever was inside. Carolyn had died 6 weeks earlier. Pancreatic cancer. She'd been diagnosed in March and gone by August. That's how fast it takes everything. We hadn't spoken in 11 years. I finally opened it on a Thursday morning, standing at the counter in my bathrobe, coffee going cold beside me. The letter informed me that I was named in Carolyn's will and requested my presence at a reading scheduled for the following Friday at their offices in downtown Portland. It also said my son Theodore had already been notified. I read that line twice. Theodore. I set the letter down and looked out the window at the yard I'd been meaning to mow for 2 weeks. A fat robin was pulling a worm out of the wet grass, tugging at it with that focused, merciless patience that birds have. I watched until it got what it wanted and flew off. Then I called my sister. "You're going," she said before I'd finished explaining. I don't know what Carolyn would have left me. We were divorced. "You're going," she said again the way she's been saying things to me since we were kids, like the matter's already settled and I just haven't caught up yet. I went. Let me tell you something about the 23 years I was married to Carolyn. They weren't bad years. Not all of them. She was brilliant, a corporate tax attorney who made partner at 34, which in the early 1990s, as a woman, was the kind of thing that got written up in the Oregonian. I was an electrician, licensed, running my own small crew by the time we met, but still a man who came home with grease under his fingernails and calluses that never quite softened. Theodore was born 2 years after our wedding. He was, from the beginning, his mother's son. That's not a complaint, it's just a fact. He had her precision, her impatience with inefficiency, her talent for making you feel, in a single glance, that you had not quite measured up. By the time he was 12, he was correcting my grammar at the dinner table. By 16, he told me, not cruelly, just matter-of-factly, the way you might note the weather, that he intended to go to Yale, become an attorney like his mother, and that he didn't see the point of learning how to change the oil in a car. Mechanics exist for that, he said. I looked at Carolyn across the table. She was hiding a smile behind her wine glass. I let it go. I let a lot of things go in those years. The accident happened in January of 2001. Theodore was 17. Carolyn and I had been at a dinner party at the Hendersons, old friends of Carolyn's from law school, and she'd had more to drink than either of us realized until we were in the car, and I felt the way she was taking the curves on Burnside. "Pull over," I said. "Let me drive." "I'm fine." "Carolyn." I said I'm fine, Edward. She wasn't fine. She clipped a parked car on the shoulder of the road, a dark blue Subaru belonging to a man named George Paulson, who was, at that moment, asleep in the house 20 feet away. The impact wasn't serious. A scraped bumper, a cracked taillight. Carolyn kept driving. "Stop the car," I said. It was nothing, a tap. It was someone's property. "Stop." She didn't stop. We got home. I lay awake most of the night, and in the morning I drove back to Burnside and found the Subaru still parked there, bumper scraped, taillight cracked. I left a note with my phone number. George Paulson called me that afternoon. I told him I'd been the one driving. I gave him my insurance information. The claim was filed, paid out, and that should have been the end of it. Except George Paulson had a security camera on his porch. It showed Carolyn's car. It showed the impact. It showed, clearly enough, the police said, that the driver was not me. I was charged with filing a false insurance claim. Obstruction. A few other things that my lawyer eventually got reduced or dropped. What remained was enough for a conviction. I served 14 months at a minimum security facility in Sheridan, Oregon. Carolyn filed for divorce before I was released. I never told Theodore that his mother had been driving. You want to know why? People always want to know why. My sister asked me. My lawyer asked me. The court-appointed counselor I saw for 6 months after I got out asked me, tilting her head with that particular expression that meant she was trying to understand something she found genuinely baffling. The honest answer is that it wasn't a decision I made exactly. It was something I understood. All at once, the morning after the accident, standing in my kitchen looking at my sleeping son's backpack by the door. Carolyn was 2 years from making senior partner. Senior partner meant different things in 1990 than it does now. It meant financial security that I, with my small electrical crew, could not match. It meant Theodore's college fund was real and not aspirational. It meant the life she'd built for herself and, by extension, for him, would continue. A criminal conviction for a DUI hit and run would have ended all of that. I thought I was protecting my son's future. I understand now how much damage I did instead. Theodore found out about the conviction when a kid at school told him. He came home and stood in the kitchen, same door, different morning, and asked me if it was true. I said yes. He asked me why. I said I'd made a bad decision, and I was sorry. He looked at me with Carolyn's eyes and said very quietly, "I don't know who you are." He was 17. He didn't speak to me again for 11 years. Not really. The occasional holiday email, a birthday call that lasted less than 4 minutes. He moved to New York after Yale, then to Chicago, then back to New York. He became, as promised, an attorney. He married a woman named Phyllis, who I've met exactly once, at a cousin's wedding, where Theodore shook my hand like I was a client he was being polite to. I knew he loved his mother. I knew he blamed me for the destruction of our family, for the disgrace, for everything that had come apart. I let him blame me. I had chosen this after all. You don't get to complain about the weight of something you picked up yourself. I moved back to Portland after Sheridan, rebuilt the electrical business. It was smaller than before. A conviction does things to your licensing, and it takes time to repair, but I got it back to a place I was proud of. I retired at 66. I have a small house in southeast Portland, a lab mix named Hector, and a garden that is, by any objective measure, overambitious for one person. It was a quiet life, not unhappy, but quiet in the way that a room is quiet after someone has left it. The law offices of Hargrove and Associates were on the 14th floor of a building on W 5th that had the kind of lobby that makes you aware of your shoes. Mine were clean. I'd polished them the night before, which felt both sensible and faintly absurd. I arrived 10 minutes early. Theodore was already there. He was standing by the window with his coat still on, looking at the city the way people look at things they're not actually seeing. He'd gotten gray at the temples since the wedding. He was 50 now. He looked like a man who had been successful and knew it. In that way that can look either like confidence or armor depending on how the light hits. He turned when I came in. His expression didn't change. "I didn't know you'd be here," he said. "The firm contacted me." A pause. "Why would she have left you anything? You were divorced." "I don't know," I said. We sat on opposite ends of a leather couch and didn't speak. A paralegal brought coffee. I held mine without drinking it. Theodore checked his phone 3 times in 4 minutes. An older couple, Carolyn's sister Margaret and her husband, arrived and sat across from us. Margaret gave me a look that said several things simultaneously, none of them warm. The attorney came in at 10 o'clock exactly. His name was Hargrove Jr., the son, not the father who'd built the firm. He was around 45, with the careful politeness of someone accustomed to rooms full of people who all want different things. He explained the distribution of the estate first. The house in Lake Oswego, the investment accounts, the art collection. These went to Theodore and to 3 charitable foundations that Carolyn had supported for decades. It was a substantial estate. I watched my son absorb the numbers with the practiced calm of someone who had already had this conversation privately and was now simply watching the formality conclude. Then Hargrove Jr. paused and opened a second folder. "There is one additional bequest," he said, "and a letter directed specifically to Theodore, which your mother requested be read aloud in this setting." Theodore looked up from his phone. "To you," Hargrove Jr. said, glancing at me. "She's left the sum of $40,000, which she describes as," he read from the document, "insufficient restitution for what was taken from him, but offered in the only way available to me now." The room was very quiet. Theodore said, "What does that mean?" It wasn't a question exactly. It was the voice of someone who already suspects the answer and is hoping to be wrong. Hargrove Jr. picked up the second document. "I'll read the letter." I knew what it would say. I had known, I think, from the moment I saw my name on the envelope 3 days ago. Some part of me had known for years that Carolyn was not, underneath everything, a woman who could carry something like this all the way to the end without trying to put it down. The letter was 3 pages, handwritten, Carolyn's handwriting, angular and precise. The same handwriting I'd seen on grocery lists and birthday cards, and the note she'd left me the morning she filed for divorce, which had said only, "I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix this." Hargrove Jr. read slowly. She wrote that she had been the one driving the night of the accident. She wrote that she had asked me, not in words, but in everything that was understood between us at that time, to take the blame, and that I had done it without asking for anything in return. She wrote that she had told herself it was a practical decision. The rational allocation of consequences. The kind of cost-benefit reasoning she'd been trained to apply. She wrote that she had been wrong, and that she had known she was wrong, and that she had known she was wrong, and that she had gone ahead anyway. She wrote that divorcing me after my release had been the action she was most ashamed of in her life, that she had convinced herself, by then, that distance was the only way to survive what she'd done, that every year she stayed near me she would have to look at what she'd asked of me, and she was not strong enough for that. She wrote that she had never told Theodore the truth because she was afraid of what he would think of her, and that she understood, finally, that this fear had cost him 11 years of his father. She wrote, "I am not asking you to forgive me. I am only asking you to understand that your father is a better man than I allowed him to appear. He is a better man than most. He chose to protect you, even when the cost was everything. I made him pay that cost, and then I left. That is the truth, and I should have told you long before I had to put it in a letter." The last line was, "Be better to him than I was. You still have time." Hargrove Jr. set down the letter. Margaret, across the room, had her hand over her mouth. Her husband was staring at the carpet. I was looking at my son. Theodore had not moved. He was sitting very straight the way he used to sit as a boy when he was trying not to cry and thought that stillness might help. His phone was face down on the table in front of him. His coffee was untouched. He didn't look at me for a long moment. When he did, his face had the particular rawness of someone whose anger has just had the floor pulled out from under it. Not gone exactly, but suddenly without anywhere to stand. "She was driving," he said. "Not to me, not to anyone in particular." "Yes." "And you?" He stopped, pressed his lips together, tried again. "You went to prison. 14 months. Because you." Another stop. He looked at the letter in Hargrove Jr.'s hands like it was something he was trying to decide whether to touch. "You thought you were protecting me." I didn't answer right away. I wanted to say yes, that's exactly it, you understand now. But the truth was more complicated than that, and I'd spent enough years being imprecise about this particular truth. "I thought I was protecting what you had," I said. "The school, the future your mother was building for you." I told myself it was the practical choice. I paused. I've spent a long time wondering if I was also just afraid of what would happen to her if I didn't, whether it was really about you at all, or whether it was about the fact that I still loved her and couldn't watch her lose everything. Theodore looked at me. Something in his face shifted. Not softening exactly, but opening, the way a window looks when someone's raised it an inch. "You could have told me," he said. "After. When I was older." "Yes." "Why didn't you?" I thought about this. I'd thought about it for 20 years, in the middle of sleepless nights and on long drives and in the counselor's office and in every silence my son and I had built between us like a wall, brick by careful brick. "Because by the time you were old enough," I said, "it felt like it would only be about me. Like I'd be telling you to make myself feel better or to get you back. And I thought I had made a choice. I thought I had made a choice. I thought I had to live with the consequences of it, even the ones I hadn't anticipated. I was a consequence. Yes, I said. You were. He exhaled, looked at the window. A long moment passed. I called you an embarrassment, he said quietly, at Aunt Margaret's retirement dinner. I told people, he stopped. I told people things about you, because I believed them. I know. I've thought them for 20 years. I know that too. He turned back to me. His eyes were red, no, not crying, but close. The same way they'd gone red when he was a kid and was trying very hard to be older than he was. I don't know what to do with this, he said. I thought of the robin in my yard, pulling at that worm with patient, focused certainty. I thought of my sister saying you're going, before I'd even finished the sentence. I thought of the envelope sitting on my kitchen table for 3 days, and how I'd known, somewhere underneath the avoidance, that whatever was inside it was going to ask something of me. Neither do I said. Not exactly. I paused. But I'd like to try. If you want to. Theodore looked at his hands, then back at me, then at the letter still in Hargrove Jr.'s hands. Can I have that? He said. The letter. Hargrove Jr. nodded and passed it across. Theodore held it carefully, the way you hold something fragile that you're not sure yet whether to keep. We sat there for a while longer. Margaret and her husband left quietly. Hargrove Jr. excused himself with the practiced tact of a man who has witnessed a great many of these rooms and knows when to disappear. The city went on being the city outside the window. Eventually, my son asked me if I'd eaten breakfast. I said no. He said there was a diner 2 blocks away that he'd noticed walking over and that he had nowhere to be until afternoon if I wanted to get something. I said I did. We rode the elevator down in silence, which was a different kind of silence than the one upstairs. Not empty exactly, but new. Like a room that's just been opened after a long time, full of old air and the faint possibility of light. Outside on Fifth Avenue, he fell into step beside me without deciding to. We walked a full block before either of us spoke. The morning was gray, the way Portland mornings are gray in October. Not threatening, just overcast, the kind of light that makes everything look considered and still. He had good instincts about you, Theodore said eventually. Hector. I glanced at him. You've never met Hector. I've seen the pictures. He stopped. I looked at your Facebook page once. A few years ago, you'd posted a picture of him in the garden. I thought about that. My son, somewhere in a New York apartment or a Chicago office, looking at a picture of my dog in my garden. Not reaching out. Not calling. But looking. He's a good dog, I said. You should bring him next time. Next time. 2 words that contained something enormous, offered quietly, like a hand extended across a distance that had seemed, until this morning, permanent. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. We walked the last half block to the diner and went inside, out of the gray October morning, into the warmth and the noise and the ordinary life that had been waiting, patient as anything, for us to find our way back to it. I keep thinking about that robin in my yard, the one I watched the morning I finally opened the envelope, pulling at something buried, patient and certain, until it came free. I didn't plan any of what happened in that conference room. I didn't go there expecting to get my son back. I went because my sister told me to, and because some quiet part of me understood that whatever was in that envelope was going to ask something of me whether I was ready or not. That's how it usually works. The things that matter most don't wait until you're prepared. What I did 20 years ago, taking the blame for something Carolyn did. I've turned that over in my hands so many times, I know every edge of it. People hear that story, and they split almost immediately into 2 camps. Half of them say what the man in the comments said. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. The other half go quiet in a way that tells me they understand it, even if they can't explain why. I think the split comes down to whether you believe there's a difference between a decision that costs you everything and a decision that's wrong. I made a choice that had consequences I didn't fully anticipate, but I made it with my whole self, for reasons that were real, even if they were also flawed. That has to count for something, not everything, but something. What I've come to understand is that integrity isn't the absence of mistakes. It's the willingness to live inside them honestly, without rewriting them to make yourself look better. I never told Theodore the truth because I convinced myself it would be self-serving. Maybe I was right. Maybe I was also a coward. Both things can be true. What I know is that the version of me who sat across from my son in that law office, the one who answered his questions without deflecting, who admitted out loud that I didn't know if my sacrifice had really been about him or about my own feelings for his mother, that man was more honest than the one who'd stayed silent for 20 years. It was late, but it was real. Theodore's 50 years old. He built his entire understanding of me on a foundation that wasn't true, and he lived there for 2 decades. That took something from him that I can't give back. The reasonable thing, the intelligent thing, would have been for Carolyn to tell him years ago, or for me to find the way. We were both too afraid. Fear, dressed up as practicality, is still fear. I've had to sit with that. But here's what I also know. The willingness to walk into a room where you might be humiliated, to sit on that couch and hold your coffee and wait. That's not nothing. Theodore asking me if I'd eaten breakfast, suggesting a diner 2 blocks away, telling me to bring Hector next time. That didn't happen because life is fair. It happened because neither of us gave up completely. He kept a door cracked open, even when he thought he was closing it. I stayed in Portland, kept the house, kept the garden, kept being findable. We held on to the possibility of each other without ever saying so out loud. The years between us are real, the damage is real. But so is the diner. So is next time. I'm 63 years old, and I'm still learning that the strength to endure something quietly is only worth anything if you eventually find the strength to speak. They're not opposites. You need both. The long silence taught me who I was. The conversation in that conference room taught me who I still had a chance to become. I think about what Carolyn wrote at the end of her letter. You still have time. She was talking to Theodore. But I read it too. She was right.